Hello, my fellow fallible human. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you spending a few minutes to listen to my story because I'm passionate about sharing my story and what has and hasn't worked for me in my own recovery from drug and alcohol addictions. I relapsed for 8 years, every year, while attending 12-step meetings. And that was not the fault of the program of 12 steps of AA and NA. I think it was more of my problem not being able to fully understand addiction and why I couldn't just stop. I had a lot of people ask me, why can't you just stop? You're an intelligent woman. You've got a lot going for you. You're able to do so many other things. What's up with this? Why can't you just stop? And I couldn't understand why I couldn't just stop. I didn't understand my addictions. I knew I had a lot of family members who were also challenged by addiction. There was no shortage of addictions, you name it, whether it be shopping, eating, pornography, gaming, gambling, alcohol, drugs. No shortage of addictions in my family tree, that's for sure. So, what I started to understand in my 8 years of relapsing while attending 12-step meetings was that there are actual stages of relapse. And it took me relapsing every year for 8 years to start to recognize what those earlier stages were. So, there are actually three stages of relapse. And it doesn't happen right away. It can happen weeks, sometimes even months before the actual physical relapse. So the physical relapse is one stage. That's your last stage. So let's see if we can't prevent the physical relapse from happening. So the other two stages, the earlier stages, are the emotional relapse and the mental relapse. So the emotional relapse starts to happen when you recognize yourself getting impatient. You might be easily irritated, expressing angry words more often, having a challenge taking care of yourself. Self care becomes more and more of a challenge, and you put it off and you make excuses. And then that might run into mental relapse. So the mental relapse happens when we stay stuck in emotional relapse for too long. So the emotional relapse, and I remember them very, very well, it starts like a slow whirlpool. And I started to lose patience. I started to say angry things. I started to become more aggressive in my behavior and my speech. And the narrative was becoming very, very powerful. And then that, if I held on to that too long, then that became a mental relapse. And the mental relapse got the whirlpool happening a lot faster. So now my addictive brain is literally screaming to me. You know, I often talk about that itty bitty shitty committee in my head that never shuts up. And why I work so hard on cognitive therapies and the repetition of affirmations and having a structured routine and doing the same thing every day, and the importance of having that structured routine. You know, I feel like I'm banging this drum. We talk about having every toolbox needs a hammer. What is your hammer going to be? My hammer is the repetition of things, the tools that work for me, specifically that unconditional acceptance philosophy that I talk about so often because it's been a crucial part of my successful recovery from drug and alcohol addictions. So it's one thing to say my journey started in 2009 when I went into a rehab. That physical sobriety was okay. That was the first step. But then going out to life, getting back to my life, resuming my life the way it was, that takes emotional sobriety, something that wasn't talked about a lot in 2009. When I left rehab in that 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was told to go to 30 meetings in 30 days. That was my aftercare. Well, I was good for 30 days going to 30 meetings, but that was it. The next 30 days were a struggle for me. And I think I hung on that first time, maybe 3 or 4 months, maybe 6. But I relapsed because of that narrative that was going on in my head. And that was the emotional relapse that was happening that I didn't recognize. So for me, recognizing these early stages of relapse, the emotional relapse is the one that I needed to get the handle on, to recognize, oh, okay, I recognize this. happening. I recognize this train of thought. I recognize how these thoughts are leading to these behaviors. This is a warning sign for me. It's becoming a very slippery slope. So now what am I going to do? So what am I going to do? The strategies kick in. There's the toolbox that we have been building. We need this arsenal of tools, and there are hundreds of tools to choose from. The key is to find what works for you and then continue doing more of that. So how positive am I that this program works? Well, I'm recording this we're in January of 2023, starting a new year. 2023, be free in 2023. And I am now celebrating over 4 years of continual abstinence from my drug and alcohol addictions. First time ever I've managed to go 4 years. So this works when I work it, my self-care. So I'm doing the work. I recognize that I want to learn to say, okay, oh, yeah, there's that train of thought. There's that addictive brain kicking in. What am I going to do to not graduate into the mental relapse, which will take me to the physical relapse? So that means like the airplane analogy, right? If we're flying in that metal tube, which I was never a big fan of to begin with, but flying in the metal tube of the airplane, and if the cabin pressure changes and that oxygen mask falls down from the ceiling, we are told, even if we have our child sitting beside us, put the mask on yourself first. You can't help anyone until you help yourself. That is not selfish. That is self-care, and it's imperative that you learn how to look after yourself. So self-care, get good sleep. I find if you can get to sleep at the same time every day and wake up the same time every day, it helps to get that structure going, set your physiology, help retrain your brain. Eating at the same time every day, also very important. Eating 3 meals a day. Sometimes I used to push myself through lunch and I wouldn't eat until supper time. So that was only 2 meals a day. And that can add up over time. Physiologically, we need to fuel our body with healthy things. And that includes drinking lots of water. Doing these videos is one of the hardest things I've been able to do because I am, like everybody, not a big fan of public speaking. So to be actually looking in a camera and recording myself is something that's taken me a long time to face that fear. So that's something else I can help you with too. So I want you to think about self-care. Are you looking after yourself? Are you doing the work? Recovery doesn't take long. It takes a persistent willingness to exert consistent efforts to help yourself. So if you would like to have a chat with me about the different programs I offer, including a 1-week residential program, yes, I know you don't need 30 days in rehab. You can get a nice infrastructure built in 1 week so you can go back to your life, resume your responsibilities, and now you've got the beginning of that arsenal that you need to build so you can do things repetitiously and start retraining your brain to serve you in healthier ways. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for listening. Go to my website, redroofrecovery.com, and have a look around and see if anything is helpful there. So if you or your family members are challenged in any way by addictions, I'm always happy to have a conversation with you. May the force be with you. And remember, you are the force.